Dear chess friends, the other day I made up a quote which says in chess, if you're getting stronger, then your games are getting longer. So what does it mean? So when you start to play chess when you're a beginner, then you win probably many games very easily, but you lose also many times the games very easily. So your games are not getting so long. You win the game in 15, maybe 20 moves, or you have at least a losing or a completely winning position already in move 15, move 20. Then of course, if you're getting stronger, maybe your games are lasting really in a good way, maybe for 30-40 moves. But if you're getting really strong, many times you can expect that your games will reach a fully endgame stage. So you will probably play many beautiful endgames if you're getting really strong in chess. So I think it's sort of a measure point that I think can be applied. If your games are, as I said, are getting longer, then you're getting probably stronger in chess. So it's, I think, really incredible thing. So what does it take to win a game in a chess endgame? I think when we have now followed many games that have been played in top grandmaster level, basically the games are decided by recognizing a couple of patterns in chess endgames. So maybe you recognize the possibility of a distant pass pawn, maybe you recognize the possibility to create a better minor piece, maybe applying some kind of a bad bishop strategy or something. So basically you recognize maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3, 4 patterns. But would you believe me when I would say you that Magnus Carlsen created 11 really crucial and vital patterns in one game, in one specific endgame that he played? Probably many of us would say that I'm making it up, but actually here Magnus Carlsen pulled off really wild endgame technique against Alireza Firouzja back from the 2021 Norway chess event, in which he created a really beautiful 11 chess ideas which are crucial, which are vital. And the cool part about this endgame is that Magnus Carlsen produced these ideas in an equal endgame. So the game was about 0.0, so the engine left the position for both sides, but Magnus played the best engine move and created, as I said, this beautiful 11 ideas that are written down here for you. So the first idea that you see is a simplification. Pawns have to be on opposite colors than your bishop. So all of these patterns that I've written down here we will follow as they're coming in the game. So be prepared. If you have trouble maybe in your endgames, this will be, it's almost like you reading a whole book about chess endgames by just watching one beautiful gameplay by Magnus Carlsen. So let's see now the game. Magnus played with the white pieces, opened with the move e4. Alireza's response was e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5. So we'll not, I think, dive into chess opening theory too much here. We'll try to get to the endgame stage very fast. So after move a6, we have the Morphy Defense, bishop to a4, knight to f6, kingside castling b5, bishop to b3, bishop to c5, and now the move a4 is of course creating some tensions on the a file. So here rook to b8, of course getting out of this a file mess. And now after move c3, we have now the move d6, d4 by Magnus. After bishop to b6, now comes already a tricky idea here by Magnus. Beautiful stunning move a5. The problem is now you cannot take knight takes a5. The problem is this tactical sequence: rook to e5, bishop to e5, bishop to a5, and here after d takes e5. The problem is now the tension on the d file after queen to d8, king to d8. Now knight to e5 leads into complications. Several fork threats are here. Knight to f7, also knight to c6 is simply game over here already for black. So that's why after move a5, Alireza retreated here to a7. Now we have h3, a beautiful prophylactic move by Magnus, not allowing to get pinned by this beautiful bishop's activity on g4. Bishop to b7 by Alireza, bishop to e3. Magnus sacrifices one pawn, but this is actually also good theory of the Ruy Lopez. Usually you can play also here rook to e1, but Magnus played the slightly more aggressive line with the move knight to e4, and now we have here knight to d2 by Magnus Carlsen, challenging now the knight in the center of the board. Just a little bit theory here. Actually, there is a really wild line with this method with the move d5. This line has been played many times in chess history. After d5, the game becomes really wild. After bishop to e3, d takes c6. Notice that now two pieces are hanging, and basically in this line, black is sacrificing now two pieces for the rook. Maybe after knight to h3, king to h2 is of course not good. You have this idea bishop to f4. You have to step back to h1, and now black again retreats to f2. But now we can pick up the piece. You have to play something like bishop to f2, and now we pick up here the bishop. You retreat with the bishop. So it's a famous line that has been played many times in chess history. So it's a wild complex line, but now the game is splashing a little bit. So you can be the guest of this position. I'm not sure if I would love to play now this game from white's or from black's perspective, so you can be my guest, as I said. So that's why after move knight to d2, Magnus plays the more solid way. He doesn't want to go into this tactical sequences. Now after move knight to d2 by Reza, queen to d2, kingside castling, and now here comes the idea by Magnus Carlsen. Okay, he lost the pawn on e4, but now the knight is a little bit overloaded here to the defense of the bishop on a7, but also to the defense of the pawn on e5. So now after a couple of trades of pieces, bishop to a7, knight to a7, knight to e5, we are now in the endgame stage. So now the fun starts. Many of us would say this is draw for sure. Yeah, draw my... Okay, knight to e5. Here Alireza goes with bishop to d5, Magnus retreats, knight to c6, knight to c6, bishop to c6. So the game gets more and more simplified. And now comes the first idea here by Magnus Carlsen. Here Magnus plays rook from a to d1. And I've written down, now we're following Magnus Carlsen's ideas, really beautiful, vital and crucial ideas in the endgame stage. First of all, simplification. If you are feeling that your opponent has better activities, trade off the pieces that are active by him. So you see Alireza, after move rook to d8 here, he has occupied the d file, so his rook is more active. That's why Magnus Carlsen is saying, I will simplify it till the end, because I don't like your rook's activity. After rook to e8, Magnus goes rook to xd8, rook to xd8, and now rook to d1. He simplifies it till the end. He recognized that if he doesn't trade off the rooks, then he could have complications. So the first aspect and very beautiful idea was, I think, the simplification. So please follow these things that I've written down here, in the right corner. So after move rook to d1, rook takes d1, bishop to d1. After move king to f8, now comes the other beautiful idea. This is now keeping your pawns on opposite colors than your bishops is aiming. So you see now Magnus Carlsen is now trying b4. He's trying now f4. He's trying now to keep all of his pawns on dark squares, where they cannot be, of course, attacked by the light square bishop. The light square bishop is slicing, of course, the light square. So, and of course, if you want to have a better activity with your piece, then of course you don't want to have so many pawns that are standing in the way of your own bishop. So now you see Magnus Carlsen is playing this second beautiful idea. He's keeping his pawns on opposite colored squares. So here after move king to f8, king to f2, and we have king to d6, and now b4. This is now the third idea. This is now this beautiful restriction. b4 is not allowing here the king to come on our side of the board. Very, very important idea, because restrictions are very important in chess endgames. You don't have so many pieces here. You see, you have an active king and then you have an active bishop. Only two pieces are playing here, basically. So if you restrict them, then of course you have better activities with your pieces. So now b4, again a beautiful idea by Magnus Carlsen, beautiful restriction idea. So this is now the third beautiful idea in this endgame. Bishop to d5, now g4, h6, and now Magnus plays a beautiful, really wild idea, and I really love this idea. He creates now the distant pass pawn. This is now the fourth idea by Magnus in this beautiful chess endgame. He creates a distant pass pawn because actually, look at this. Alireza cannot play this move f6. He can, but it leads, I think, into complications. After g takes f6, g takes f6, there could be maybe a path for the king. The king could maybe somehow get into the defense. So there are holes now in the position. So that's why, in order to not allow holes, actually Alireza has to play now h takes g5, and after f takes g5, now comes the fun part. Magnus Carlsen created the distant pass pawn. Really, really wild stuff. What I mean about the distant pass pawn, notice the yellow arrow that's now aiming, so the pawn is rolling on the h file. In an optimal world, of course, if something clears now, if maybe the game gets more and more simplified, notice that the black's king has to always follow the distant pass pawn on the h file, so the king will get simply too far away from the action. On the other hand, black can maybe create a passer on the f file, which is much, much closer to the center. So we are following now the red arrow here by white. So white picks up now the red pawn on the f file. black picks up the yellow pawn on the h file, but of course white is then much closer to the action and will simply get closer to this pawn and will probably take many of them, and this is now completely winning endgame. So now, as I said, the fourth beautiful idea here by Magnus Carlsen was to create a distant pass pawn. He recognized that with this beautiful g5 move immediately. Really stunning idea here by Magnus Carlsen. After h takes g5, f takes g5, and now the pawn is rolling on the h file. Now after move c5 that Alireza is playing, Magnus is ignoring, simply of course plays on the centralization. I've written down also here the centralization as a very important aspect, but you see the centralization idea in a better moment. So far of course we have to use now our king as an active piece. Of course, in chess endgames, you don't have to defend your king. Your king is useful. Your king has to play. So that's why the centralization of the king is a normal idea. But you see, as I said, the centralization in a much more beautiful way when the king comes towards the center further. So now Alireza took, c takes b4, c takes db4, and after king to e5, now Magnus plays another brilliant idea, h4, and he forces now a weak pawn complex. So I've written down under the number 5, you see the pawn complex as a strategic problem actually. So this is now the new idea, because this move h4 forces immediately the move g6, and you see now this is the position that you want to get in bishop and pawn endgames. Black has problems because all of the pawns are on light squares and Magnus Carlsen's pawns are on dark squares. If you ignore this, if you play something like bishop to e6, if you don't play g6, the problem is now this one, h5. The distant pass pawn is rolling now. Now you play maybe king to f5, which seems like a natural idea. The king is getting closer, but now h6 is working. G takes h6, g takes h6. Okay, the king is now getting towards the pawn, but look at this. After bishop to f3, you can pick up now here the pawn on h6, but now Magnus Carlsen would probably take both of these pawns and has now two connected passers which are winning in the game. And then of course here we can maybe even sacrifice in some wild lines maybe this bishop for this pawn if necessary, but I think when we grab both of these pawns with the support of the king, one of these pawns will be promoted by white for sure. So you see, with the move h4, Magnus Carlsen is forcing another pawn move on g6. This is really incredible. Now Magnus goes with bishop to g4, and after bishop to e6, now comes the stunning move. Many of us would trade it off. Many of us would do something else, but now Magnus plays the immortal h5. This is now a beautiful bad bishop strategy. I've written it down here. You see, we have now the bad bishop strategy as Magnus Carlsen's sixth idea in this beautiful chess endgame. h5 is a problem because you cannot take, of course, the bishop on g4, and this pawn is rolling on the h file. You can maybe get the king closer, but now this pawn is unstoppable because the bad bishop strategy is working here. Look at this. All of these pawns are paralyzing the bishop activity of black, so the light square bishop cannot get into the game. So now with the move h5, the pawn is rolling. This pawn is really unstoppable. Amazing technique here by Magnus. So that's why Alireza has to play now g takes h5. We have now bishop to h5, king gets closer, and now after king to bishop to f3, notice, okay, the bishop is again trying to get here on b7, so we have the same idea. You can pick up my pawn here, but I will try to pick up your pawn on a6 and also your pawn on b5. So that's why Alireza had to retreat to c8. We have now king to d4, and after king to g5, now comes the beautiful move king to e5. And we have now the opposition position, so this is now when the kings are lined up parallelly like this. So now basically white's king is controlling black's king here, and it comes in a beautiful way because many of us would play the move f6, but this is not working. So we have now the opposition, but we have now also the beautiful centralization. Now the white king is really on the optimal square. The white king is now neutralizing black's king. Although Magnus Carlsen is down a pawn, but he has now every piece on the optimal square. There are only two pieces that are playing, but these are really pieces on the optimal square. Black's light square bishop is defensive, and the king is too far away from the action. So we have now really two problems here in black's position. So you see, if you play f6 now, this is simply too slow. Magnus simply goes towards the queen side. Now we play something like bishop to c6. We get out of the range of the king, and now maybe black is trying to produce some pass pawn ideas. So she's trying to push the pawn on the f file, but actually this is not working. King to c7 is going to happen. You have to step back with the bishop, and now Magnus will probably pick up both of these pawns if necessary. As I said, we sacrifice the bishop for a pawn, and now two pass pawns against the bishop are winning here for sure in this particular position. Usually maybe this could be a drawish position if the king would be, of course, somewhere here. Maybe you can sacrifice then the bishop for 2 pawns, but in this position this is not working because, as we said, Black's king is simply too far away from the action. So as I said, here after move king to e5, we have now the beautiful centralization, but also the beautiful opposition, which is neutralizing the other king here. The king is stuck here simply on the king side. So now Alireza goes with f5. So as we said, f6 is simply too slow here. So that's why Alireza plays f5. We have now king to d6, and now after move f4, notice that Magnus Carlsen previously played the move bishop to f3, which came, of course, with the idea to play bishop to b7, but now the bishop on f3 is creating a beautiful blockade. So the pawn cannot move there. As we said, maybe in some lines we will have to sacrifice the bishop, but this beautiful blockade produces problems for black because black will need I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 moves just in order to get rid of this bishop and start to push the pawn on the f file. So this beautiful bishop is holding now the potential progress of the pawn. So it's really annoying here, this bishop on f3. So as I said, Alireza has to lose time just in order to attack the bishop. Then we can still retreat and follow this pawn to the f1 square, so we don't have to sacrifice it immediately on f3. So this is really wild. So now we have the 9th element, the beautiful blockade. Now after move king to e5, now comes pardon me, after king to after move f4, now comes the most epic move I think in the game, which is now a beautiful Zugzwang. Now we have a Zugzwang idea because this is now a position where black needs now to make a move, and every move is bad. That's the idea about the Zugzwang position. It's of course in German a term that says that you are forced to move. That's, I think, the correct translation of this Zugzwang method. So black is basically forced to make a reaction, to make a move, and every move is bad because whatever you do, for instance, you're trying to move bishop to h3, let's see, for instance, this line, then we attack the pawn. You're maybe trying to liberate somehow this position for the pawn, but now we play something like bishop to c8. You're trying to get around, but now after king to e4, we can maybe try to stop it. Look at this, the king is getting here to closer. We're playing a couple more moves with the pawn, and now eventually we will take it. So we're playing sort of an, again, Zugzwang idea. The bishop cannot really move. The bishop is always, I think, paralyzed to the defense of this pawn on a6 and also of the pawn on b5. So this is not working. So after move king to e5, we have now really a beautiful Zugzwang position. So every move by black is bad. So that's why here Alireza played king to g6. Magnus picks up now the pawn on f4, and it's now a different story. It's now completely winning here by Magnus Carlsen because, as we said, the king is simply too far away from the action. And also notice all of these pawns are again still on light square, so this should be completely winning here from Magnus. King to f6, now again a beautiful restriction by Magnus. Magnus is not allowing here Alireza Firouzja to breathe, to get with the king into the game. If you play something like king to e7, then you see now comes again the beautiful opposition. We are following the king. The problem is now you cannot get to d7 because you get this one, bishop to e6, and now you played something like this. We trade off the pieces, and now we'll simply march towards this pawn. So again, it's a lost game here for black. So you see, this is really stunning. So after move bishop to d5 that Magnus Carlsen played, and black's king is still paralyzed, so the black's king cannot get closer. White will simply follow the king and the game should be over. So that's why here bishop to d7 was played by Alireza, maybe even the worst move, but as I said, there's nothing that can be done here. Magnus played now finally the move bishop to b7 after king to c6, king to e4, king to d6. Now we have bishop to after king to d6 we have now bishop to a6, which creates now the last pattern in this beautiful chess endgame, which is now the so-called supported pass pawn. So in a position in which maybe the bishops are traded off, if you could just imagine now this position without the bishops, still it's of course completely winning because white can always go towards this pawn. Even if black goes towards somehow this pawn on b4. Whenever you take the pawn on b4, whenever you simply far away from the action, white will simply start to push the a pawn, and this is now completely winning. So after bishop to a6, we have now bishop to c6 by Alireza Firouzja, king to d4, bishop to e8. Now Magnus Carlsen went to b7 after bishop to d7, bishop to f3, and now Magnus is targeting this idea. He's trying to reroute the bishop, which is of course somehow targeting of course the square, and in this particular position actually Alireza Firouzja resigns. So as I said, whatever you do, you start maybe to play something like this, we will simply reroute the bishop here to e4, and as I said, would just support simply our further progress of the pawn. If you trade off in any occasions the bishops off the board, then of course still white is winning the game for sure. So really stunning endgame here by Magnus Carlsen. So as I said, here he produced this 11 ideas simplification. So as I said, read it please. All of these beautiful elements we have seen in one single chess endgame. Really stunning stuff. It's almost, as I said, like Magnus Carlsen wrote a whole chess endgame book here in one particular game. Really stunning technique by the world champion. Incredible game it was. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the endgame for sure. If you want to see more about chess endgames, please check out my basics in chess series videos and my become a master in chess studies, also with my chess endgames. These are 3 playlists that I think are worth to follow here on my YouTube chess channel. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.